Ah, bonjour mes enfants. Bienvenue Café avec Etienne. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. I'm feeling somewhat français today. That all notwithstanding, the blog and today's little speech has nothing to do with France. Ironically enough, it has somewhat to do with Korea. And along with Korea, also Karl Marx. Now, how are we going to connect those together, notwithstanding the hermit kingdom in the north? Um, this was another blog that kind of has been sitting around for a while, but I decided to write it after getting roped into one of Sandy's Korean dramas a few weeks ago. So, one of the things that you've heard me talk about numerous times has to do with power relationships. It's where I actually depart from traditional Marxist philosophy. Actually not most Marxists, sort of a defining characteristic of Marxism is a belief that those that own the means of production somehow are able to exploit the proletariat in order to maximize their own wealth to the detriment of the proletariat that actually provides the labor. And this is a quaint notion in an industrial age. In today's economy, it's totally anachronistic. It makes absolutely no sense. And the fact that there are still self-proclaimed Marxists out there, I think is incredibly problematic and shows that they are, in my opinion, more sort of focused on belonging to a group than having an actual robust political philosophy. That all notwithstanding, I do believe that Karl Marx was, interestingly enough, onto something. It just had nothing to do with economics. What Karl Marx was able to identify, and social scientists have been able to explain this more adequately than I can, but human beings naturally form hierarchical relationships. And this exists across an entire broad spectrum, whether it's governments, whether it's within organizations, or whether it's in what I call informal systems of order. Most adequately described as sort of how playgrounds operate. Most often, although this has changed and frankly to the detriment of society, I believe, most playgrounds are sort of operate as non-controllable laboratories for human development. Now, sadly, we've imposed a very rigid structure of social behavior on children as they operate on playgrounds, which I think ultimately is counterproductive and sort of takes away the whole purpose of a playground. But that again is somewhat irrelevant to how human beings naturally operate. And if you look at a playground, you'll see that social hierarchies naturally start to develop. And there is no fixed location for somebody on that social hierarchy. As long as their position near the top of the hierarchy provides value to those lower on the hierarchy, then they're allowed to stay there. But when their position no longer provides the perceived value of those underneath them, their status falls and someone else actually goes up. So there's this constant sort of, dynamic movement within that social hierarchy. People, I believe, are naturally inclined to try to elevate themselves on that hierarchy, and the best way to do so is to establish what could best be described as power. That's what I believe Marx was really onto, okay? And I liken it to these Korean dramas, and I'm sort of bringing it back to that again. In these Korean dramas, and they're all, there's hundreds of them, and they're all the same plot line. It's really pedestrian in a lot of respects. But there's always the CEO. And the CEO has almost sort of a regal connotation associated with that. And I think that's partly because of Confucianism. But regardless, this mentality is that, they are imbued with a level of sort of established hierarchy by definition of the title that they have after their name. Those of us in the West would look at that and think that completely doesn't make any sense at all. But at least within the Korean soap opera world, this makes perfect logical sense. In any event, you have this sort of established social hierarchy in these dramas, and yet the CEO, regardless of the fact that he is able to hold on to this sort of authoritarian power within his organization, is completely held at bay by his protagonist, or antagonist rather. And that antagonist is usually not a CEO. It's usually somebody else that has some form of leverage over the CEO. So ultimately speaking, the one who's in control, the one who exhibits the power, is not necessarily the person with the title. It's the person that has the ability to push the levers of power over the one with the title. And we see this in capitalist societies all the time. The person who actually has the ability to control the outcome is the one who has their money in their wallet, right? They make the decision independently whether or not they're going to subsidize a business or something like that. Operating in mass, a business can either succeed or fail because of this perceived notion of power on the part of the consumers. In my opinion, the greatest form of social good actually does come from capitalism. Again, I do encourage you to read the blog. I know, as I've been given reports by many of you, some of you don't actually read the blog. You just listen to these pontificate, videos that I produce. I don't recommend that. Believe it or not, I think I'm a better writer than I am a speaker. So definitely would encourage you to look at the source material that I've written. The blog comes out every Wednesday at artemishq.com. As always, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Carolyn, you see, I did it again. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Always, guys, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.